I arrived in San Francisco without any prior warning. As soon as my feet hit the pavement, I learned something that made my heart race. My daughter, Emily, was in critical condition at a nearby hospital. I hadn't been told by anyone. No one had warned me. Meanwhile, her husband, Jack, was enjoying a lavish birthday party, surrounded by laughter, champagne, and the kind of life I thought I'd protected her from. The thought of it gnawed at my insides as I made my way through the streets of the city. Before we dive deeper into this story, make sure to hit the subscribe button for more shocking family revenge stories, and share where you're listening from in the comments below. Without wasting any time, I marched straight into that extravagant party, my eyes locked on Jack. As I approached him, the noise around me seemed to fade into the background, my anger swelling with every step. "Jack," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. "I have bad news for you." He turned to me, a confused expression on his face. "What is it?" he asked. "You'll find out in an hour," I replied coldly. His face turned pale as he processed the cryptic message, but I could tell the moment the words hit home. He quickly spiraled into panic, his hands shaking as he realized the gravity of the situation. Later, I found myself at the hospital where Emily had been admitted, the whole situation feeling wrong in every way possible. The key to her apartment wouldn't turn. I twisted it with force, feeling the metal scrape against something solid. My hands ached from gripping too tightly, and a cold sweat started to form on my brow despite the cool San Francisco breeze blowing through the hallway windows. This wasn't supposed to happen. My daughter had given me this key just 2 years ago, asking me to keep it in case of emergencies. I'd used it before, once when she had the flu, and another time when she was running late from work. Each time, it had opened the door without a problem. But now, as I twisted the key once more, something was off. I pulled the key out of the lock and examined it under the flickering fluorescent light. Same brass color, same worn edges where I had smoothed them down. There was the same small scratch near the head from when I dropped it in my toolbox. It was definitely my key. I tried again, slower this time, careful not to damage anything. The key slid in, but it hit something solid before reaching full depth. Someone had changed the lock. "Emily!" My voice echoed in the empty corridor. I knocked softly at first, then harder, hoping she would hear. "Honey, it's Dad. I'm here for my visit." Silence. Nothing. Not even the shuffle of footsteps or the creak of floorboards. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear beyond the deafening silence. From behind closed doors, I could hear the faint sounds of a television, muffled conversations, and the distant barking of a dog from a lower floor. But from Emily's apartment, nothing. I jabbed the doorbell 3 times, the sharp electronic chime reverberating inside. Still nothing. The pit in my stomach grew deeper with each passing second. I pulled my phone out of my coat pocket, wondering why Emily hadn't returned my calls this week. Something wasn't right. Her voicemail picked up immediately. "Hi, you've reached Emily. I can't take your call right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you soon." Her cheerful voice, so much like her mother's, hit me like a punch to the chest. "Emily, it's Dad. I'm outside your door, but the key isn't working. Did you change the locks? Call me back, honey. I'm starting to get worried." Next, I tried calling Jack. 1 ring, then his voicemail. "You've reached Jack. Leave your name and number, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." I tried again. Same result. "Jack, this is Mark. I'm at the apartment, but I can't get in. Where are you? Call me back immediately." The hallway felt suffocating now. It seemed to close in around me, the smell of garlic and fried food wafting from the neighboring apartments, the faint sounds of a television laugh track spilling into the corridor. It all felt wrong against the growing panic in my chest. I walked to the window at the end of the hall and looked down at the busy streets of San Francisco. People hustled along sidewalks, carrying groceries, coffee cups, and chatting with friends. The streets buzzed with the usual noise of city life, but everything felt distorted, out of place, as if my world had shifted and everything else had stayed the same. This wasn't right. This wasn't how Emily acted. She always answered. She always called back within an hour, even when she was busy or upset with Jack. She was responsible, considerate. She'd inherited all of that from her mother. I tried my number again. Same cheerful message. Same automated beep. Honey, it's Dad again. Something's wrong with the lock. I'm really starting to get worried. Please call me. I stood there for a moment, contemplating whether I should have called first before showing up unannounced. Emily loved surprises, always had since she was a little girl. I remembered the time I drove 6 hours to visit her in college, just to take her out to dinner. She cried happy tears right there in the restaurant, a memory I would never forget. But this felt different. This felt wrong. I leaned against the door, feeling its solid wood against my shoulder. My travel bag seemed heavier now, dragging at the muscles in my back. The fluorescent light above buzzed incessantly, casting a faint glow on the worn carpet beneath my feet. I tried calling Jack one more time. His phone went straight to voicemail again, just as I expected. He had turned it off. Why had someone changed the locks without telling me? Why hadn't Emily answered her phone for 2 weeks? And why had Jack turned his phone off when I needed to reach him? The questions circled in my head like vultures, each one worse than the last. Accidents. Illness. Something they couldn't handle alone? Something they didn't want to tell me? Footsteps suddenly echoed from the stairwell. Someone was climbing the stairs. Keys jangle with every step. Maybe it was building maintenance, someone who could explain what had happened with the lock. Maybe it was Emily coming home, ready to tell me everything. Hope and dread battled inside me as the footsteps grew closer. A man appeared at the top of the stairs, slightly out of breath, carrying a black garbage bag in one hand and keys in the other. Mid-50s, wearing faded jeans and a San Francisco Giants t-shirt, his eyes narrowed as he noticed me standing by Emily's door. "You looking for someone?" He shifted the garbage bag to his other hand, the keys jangling softly. "My daughter, Emily Hargrove, lives here." I pointed to the door at 3A. "I'm her father, Mark." "Your daughter?" He set the garbage bag down and gave me a confused look. I didn't know she was expecting anyone. "I'm Harold Jenkins, 3B. He pointed to the apartment next to Emily's. "She doesn't know I'm coming. I was just going to surprise her, but I can't get in. The lock's been changed." Harold scratched his jaw, studying me carefully. "Changed?" I asked. "When's the last time you saw Emily?" "About 2 weeks ago, maybe 3. Harold looked up, pausing as he tried to calculate. "She's usually around, you know? But lately, I haven't seen her at all." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean you haven't seen her?" "Well, she used to be out and about, going to work, getting groceries, that sort of thing. But lately, nothing. Haven't seen her coming or going. Just Jack, though." "Jack's been around?" I asked, trying to hide the rising panic in my chest. Harold's face shifted. He seemed uncomfortable as he picked up his garbage bag again and avoided my gaze. "Yeah, Jack's been around. But, different women every few days." The words hit me like cold water. "What? Jack? Your son-in-law?" "Yeah," Harold said, his voice lowering. "He's been bringing young women around, real fancy-looking ones. Thought maybe Emily moved out, but that's not what I've been seeing." My legs almost gave out from under me. How could Emily have been so completely alone while her husband brought other women into her apartment? I couldn't breathe for a second. Every word Harold spoke felt like a punch to the gut. I took a step back, leaning against the wall to steady myself. Emily was gone, but Jack, her husband of 5 years, had been in and out of her life, filling the space with someone else. "Different women, huh?" I mumbled, trying to digest what I was hearing. "Yeah, and it's been going on for a few weeks now." "Maybe more," Harold added, scratching his beard. "I don't gossip, but I'm just saying, something's wrong." My thoughts spun. Why hadn't anyone told me about this sooner? Why didn't Emily reach out, especially when Jack was obviously not the man I thought he was? I needed to find out where she was, but more than that, I needed answers. Harold stood there, still holding the garbage bag, his gaze uneasy. "I don't know what happened to her, man, but she seemed happy before. Not like now. She's always been a private one." "Where is she, Harold? Where is Emily?" "I haven't seen her for 2 weeks. Haven't even heard from her. She never came by to pick up the mail or anything. I didn't know how to process that. I had been imagining something bad happening, but the reality was far worse than my darkest fears. I couldn't help myself. You don't think she... Harold cut me off, shaking his head. No, not like that. She didn't seem unhappy. I never heard any loud arguments between her and Jack. But I can't say much else. All I know is that she's been missing, and Jack's been partying like everything's normal. It was like the world had tilted sideways. My mind raced with thoughts of my daughter being alone, isolated and sick, while Jack enjoyed his freedom, his lavish birthday parties with women, with no care for the person he had sworn to love. How could he do that to her? I looked at Harold, then back at Emily's door. I had to get in. I needed to know what had happened to my daughter. I needed to know where Jack was and why he hadn't been there for her. "Thanks, Harold," I muttered, my voice distant as I turned and walked away from him. "I'll find her." The walk down the stairs felt long, each step heavier than the last. My heart beat faster, my mind replaying everything Harold had said. I didn't know if I could trust him. After all, what did he really know? But the one thing that made sense was the lock change. The key had been tampered with. Someone was hiding something. I stepped out into the cool San Francisco air, the faint smell of the bay wafting in the breeze. The city, with all its noise and life, seemed so distant, so irrelevant now. I pulled my phone from my pocket again, feeling it as heavy as a brick in my hand. I had to call Emily. I had to know. But for the 5th time that day, her phone went straight to voicemail. This was getting worse. I couldn't keep going around in circles. She's not coming back. She's not answering. She's not. I muttered to myself, my voice trailing off. The realization sank in deeper. I had been looking at this whole situation wrong. Maybe Emily hadn't left. Maybe she couldn't leave. The thought hit me like a ton of bricks. What if she were in a hospital? What if she were hurt? What if she were in trouble? I pulled the phone away from my ear, my mind turning. I wasn't sure if I could trust Jack's silence or Emily's. But I had to find her, whatever it took. And that meant leaving the apartment complex behind and going straight to the hospital. I hailed a taxi and slid into the back seat, gripping the seatbelt like it could anchor me to some sense of stability. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked, glancing at me in the rear-view mirror. "Mount Sinai Hospital," I said quickly, the words coming out like they had been waiting for me to say them. The moment I did, I felt a shift in the air. Mount Sinai was the kind of place where lives were saved, but also the place where some stories ended. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as we sped through the streets. As we passed the busy city blocks, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I had known about my daughter's life was slipping through my fingers. There had to be some explanation for all of this. I refused to believe that Emily had disappeared. But it felt like every turn of the wheel was taking me further into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The driver's voice broke my train of thought. "It's going to be a bit of a ride. You want to tell me what's going on?" I hesitated. He wasn't a therapist, and I wasn't looking to unload my life onto some stranger, but something about his kindness made me want to share. Maybe he could offer me some comfort in this whirlwind of confusion. "It's my daughter. She's missing. I think she's been hiding something, and I've got a bad feeling about it. Her husband, well, he's been doing some things I can't even describe. But I have to find her." The driver nodded, glancing at me for a brief second before focusing on the road. "I understand. You'll find her," he said quietly, as if trying to assure me that it wasn't hopeless. His words didn't give me much comfort, but they didn't make me feel worse either. For the first time in hours, I took a deep breath and tried to steady myself. I glanced down at my phone again, but this time, instead of dialing another call to Emily, I started thinking about the one thing I could do: find her. I wasn't sure how, but I was going to find Emily. And when I did, I would have the answers I was desperately searching for. I would get to the truth, and Jack, he would have to answer for what he'd done. The taxi rolled past the buildings that lined the streets, the lights casting long shadows on the pavement. I looked out the window, but I wasn't seeing the city anymore. I was focused on the image of Emily, my daughter, somewhere out there, needing help. I had to act fast. Finally, We reached Mount Sinai Hospital. My heart lurched in my chest as the cab pulled up to the front entrance, and I was struck by the overwhelming size of the building. It looked so imposing, so cold, yet it had the potential to give me the answers I sought. I paid the driver, grateful for the ride, but now was the time to face what had been lurking at the back of my mind. What had happened to Emily? Why hadn't anyone called me about her situation? The glass doors opened with a soft whoosh, and I stepped into the sterile, antiseptic-smelling lobby of the hospital. The floors were marble, cold under my feet. People walked past me, their faces tired and anxious, like mine. I could feel the tension in the air, the stress of so many people waiting for news about their loved ones. I moved toward the information desk, where a woman in scrubs looked at me with professional detachment. "How can I help you?" she asked in a quiet voice. "I'm looking for my daughter, Emily Hargrove. I believe she's a patient here." The woman's hands hovered over her keyboard, and for a moment I felt like I was holding my breath. She typed for what seemed like an eternity before looking up at me. "Are you on her emergency contact list?" I nodded, though I could feel the weight of her gaze, like she was already assessing me. "Just a moment," she said. A few moments passed before she looked back up at me. "Room 314. Third floor. Take the elevator to your right." The weight in my chest grew heavier as I made my way toward the elevator. Room 314, the words echoing in my mind. Something about the number felt ominous, like a countdown to something I wasn't ready for. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, and I was taken up to the third floor. The silence in the elevator made my heart beat louder, faster. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway, the sound of my footsteps almost drowning out the low hum of machines and hushed voices. At the end of the hall, there was a sign that read, "Oncology Unit." That was when it hit me. The reality of what had happened to Emily. I wasn't just here to find her, I was here to face the truth. The oncology unit loomed ahead of me, a stark reminder of what lay behind the cold, sterile walls: cancer. I felt the weight of every step as I walked toward the room where my daughter was, but also the crushing realization that she wasn't just facing a physical battle. It was more than that. She was fighting her own fears, probably in ways I couldn't even imagine, while I had been out there, trying to piece together the missing parts of her life. I stopped just before the door to room 314. I had already made it this far, but now, standing here, my legs felt like they were turning to stone. I took a deep breath, exhaling slowly, and pushed the door open. Inside, the room smelled of antiseptic and fresh flowers, but the brightness of the overhead lights did little to ease the heaviness in the air. Emily lay in a hospital bed, a faint 4-line snaking from her arm. Her once vibrant features were gaunt, the skin pulled tight around her face, and her dark hair was thin, almost brittle. Machines beeped quietly around her, but her eyes, those familiar warm eyes, were open, alert, and scanning the room for me. "Dad," she whispered, her voice raspy but still strong enough to carry through the room. The sight of her like this nearly broke me. I hadn't seen her in days, hadn't even known she'd been suffering in silence. And now, here she was, pale and frail, fighting for her life, while Jack, her husband, had been absent, chasing after his own selfish desires. My heart tightened, but I pushed the feeling away. This wasn't about Jack. It was about Emily. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly, my voice cracking as I made my way over to her bedside. "I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere." Emily gave a weak smile, but the exhaustion in her eyes was unmistakable. She had been through so much, and I had been too blind to see it. "You don't look like yourself, Dad," she said quietly, her words careful, as though she were weighing every syllable. "I'm just tired, honey," I replied, my throat thick with emotion. "I've been worried about you." "You don't need to worry about me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm fine." "Emily," I said, taking her hand gently, mindful of the 4-line. "You're not fine. You've been in here for weeks, and I didn't even know. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I should have called. I should have checked in more." Her hand tightened around mine. "You don't need to apologize, Dad. You've got your own life. I didn't want to burden you with my problems. I didn't want you to worry." The words felt like a knife in my chest. Emily had always been independent, always determined to carry her own weight. But this wasn't something she should have been handling alone. I shouldn't have let it get this far. You're not a burden, sweetheart. You never were, I said, trying to steady my voice. You should have told me. You should have called me. I would have come. I would have been here. She closed her eyes for a moment, exhaustion creeping into her features. I didn't want you to see me like this, Dad. You've been through enough with Mom. I didn't want to add to that. The mention of Martha, her mother, hit me like a wave. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening as memories of her cancer battle flooded my mind. I'd promised Martha, swore on everything I had, that I would protect our daughter, that I would always be there for her, just as I had been for her mother. But in the end, had I kept that promise? I brushed my thumb gently across Emily's hand, looking into her eyes. I don't care how you look, Emily. I don't care if it's hard for me to see you this way. You're my daughter. I'm here for you. Always. A single tear slipped from her eye, and she quickly wiped it away, but the fragile, vulnerable side of her was unmistakable. She had been fighting this battle without anyone by her side, and I had been too caught up in the confusion of her husband's actions to see it. I've been doing my best to keep it together, Dad. I've been handling things on my own, but— She hesitated, then looked down at the bed. It's just been so hard. I could feel my heart breaking for her. The courage she had to summon every day just to survive this illness, the strength she had to muster to pretend like everything was okay, it was beyond what anyone should have to endure. And the fact that Jack had let her go through this alone, that he had chosen to ignore her pain and seek his own pleasure, was beyond my comprehension. What did Jack say about all this? I asked cautiously. The question was a loaded one, and I could see the change in her face as soon as I asked it. Her gaze shifted, her eyes lowering. Jack. He's been distant. He's been staying with his brother. He says he needs space to process everything, but he's been gone. I haven't seen him in weeks. He's been calling, texting, but— The words hung in the air, unspoken but clear. He hadn't been there when she needed him most. He had been absent, abandoning her to face this disease on her own. I could feel the rage bubbling up inside me again, but I kept it in check. This wasn't the time to unleash it. Has he visited? I asked, trying to keep my tone calm, but it was hard to suppress the anger I was feeling. No, she said softly. He hasn't come by since I was admitted. I've been here 2 weeks, Dad, and I've barely heard from him. It's like he's gone. That was it. The truth was finally coming to light. The man who had promised to be her partner, the one who had vowed to love and support her through thick and thin, had disappeared when she needed him most. Emily, I started, but my voice trailed off as I fought to hold back my emotions. You don't deserve this. You don't deserve to be alone in a hospital, fighting for your life while he's off living his own. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. I don't know, Dad. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what to do anymore. My heart broke for her all over again. The girl I had raised to be strong, independent, and fierce was now so fragile, fighting for her life, and still trying to protect the man who should have been there with her through it all. I'll handle it, I said finally, my voice hardening with resolve. I'll make sure you don't have to fight this battle alone, and I'll make sure he pays for what he's done. Emily's eyes widened as she heard the tone in my voice. Dad, no, don't do anything crazy. Please. I don't need more drama. I just want to focus on getting better. I nodded, but deep down, I knew something had to be done. Jack couldn't be allowed to get away with this. Not while my daughter was in pain, not while she was fighting for her life alone. I'm not going to do anything stupid, honey, I said softly, my fingers brushing her hair away from her face. But he's not going to get away with this. I could feel the weight of the promise in those words, the commitment I had made to protect my daughter, to make sure she would never be abandoned again. And I meant it. Jack had made a mistake, one he would soon regret. As I sat in the quiet of the hospital room, my mind raced, planning my next steps. I had to find Jack. I had to confront him. And I had to make sure he knew the consequences of abandoning his wife when she needed him most. The hours in the hospital room blurred into one. I had spent time with Emily, assuring her that I was there for her, that I wouldn't let her face this battle alone. Yet, in the back of my mind, a fire burned. Jack. His betrayal, his abandonment, his absence while his wife, my daughter, fought for her life. I couldn't let him get away with it. He needed to face the consequences of his actions, not just for what he had done to Emily, but for the way he had abused his position as a husband, as someone who was supposed to be her support, her partner. The city outside the hospital window was still alive, a never-ending cycle of activity and noise, but inside the sterile walls of the hospital, everything felt different. The world out there was so far removed from the reality I was living in now. And as much as I wanted to go back to Pennsylvania, to leave the tension of this city behind, I knew I couldn't. I had unfinished business. My phone buzzed. Another missed call from Jack. I couldn't bring myself to answer it, not yet. I needed time to think. Time to figure out the best way to handle this. I stood up from Emily's bedside and slipped into the hallway, phone in hand, determined to make sure I was doing the right thing. I needed to confront him, but this time, it had to be done carefully. He couldn't just walk away. Not this time. I scrolled through the messages on my phone and found something I had been hoping for, information on Jack's whereabouts. After a few discreet calls, I learned that he was at a high-end bar in downtown Manhattan, celebrating with his friends, living a life of excess. The same night, my daughter lay in a hospital bed, fighting for her survival, alone. My pulse quickened. It was time. I quickly called a cab, stepping outside into the cool evening air of the city. I needed to ensure that Jack understood the seriousness of what he had done. And I would do it face to face. I wouldn't let him hide behind phone calls or excuses. I would make sure he saw the consequences of his choices, the consequences of turning his back on his wife. As the cab moved through the thick New York traffic, the familiar buildings and streets passed in a blur. My thoughts were focused solely on Jack, on what I was about to say to him and how he was going to react. Would he be defensive? Would he try to explain himself? I doubted it. But I was determined. He had crossed a line, and now it was time for him to face the music. The cab finally pulled up outside a sleek, upscale rooftop bar. The building towered above me, a glass and steel monument to excess. I paid the driver and stepped out, walking toward the entrance with a purpose. I knew exactly where I needed to go. My gut told me he was inside. He wouldn't be able to hide for long. Inside, the music was loud, the atmosphere tense with excitement and the clinking of glasses. A group of well-dressed people surrounded a table at the center of the room. And there he was, Jack, his back to me, holding court, laughing with friends as if there were no care in the world. He looked at ease, comfortable in his skin, oblivious to what was waiting for him. I walked toward him, my eyes fixed firmly on his. He didn't see me coming, but as I closed the distance, I could feel the tension building. The others at the table noticed me first, turning their attention toward me. The air shifted, the smiles faltering as they looked at Jack, expecting him to react. Jack turned, his face falling when he saw me standing there. His expression went from smug confidence to shock, disbelief creeping into his eyes. His hand trembled slightly as he set his drink down, trying to regain his composure. "Amos, what are you doing here?" Jack stammered, standing up, his face pale. "How did you find me?" I didn't flinch. I stood tall, my presence commanding attention. "I found you the same way I find the truth, by paying attention. And you've got a lot of explaining to do, Jack." The room fell silent. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the tension between us. Jack's friends exchanged confused glances, unsure of what was happening. They hadn't been prepared for this moment. "You know," I continued, my voice cold and steady, "while my daughter is lying in a hospital bed fighting for her life, you're here. You're celebrating. You're living your life as if nothing's wrong. Do you even know what's happening to her right now, Jack?" His eyes widened, but he stammered, "Of course I know. But this is complicated. I needed time. I needed space to process things, Amos." "Space," I interrupted, stepping closer. "You've been processing for weeks, Jack. But the only thing you've been processing is how to live your life without responsibility. You've abandoned her. You've abandoned my daughter, the woman you promised to love and protect. And you've been parading other women around her apartment while she's been fighting cancer alone." I could see his face draining of color as the weight of my words sank in. The arrogance he had shown moments earlier evaporated, replaced with guilt and fear. But I wasn't finished yet. "How much money have you spent here tonight, Jack?" I asked, my tone sharp. "Do you realize that every penny you've spent celebrating your freedom could have gone toward her treatment? Instead, you've been living it up while she's been dying." Jack opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The silence was deafening. I turned to the group of people standing nearby, watching in stunned silence. "This man," I said, addressing them now, "has been using money that could have saved his wife to fund his own parties. And the worst part is that he hasn't even had the decency to show up for her. He's been a ghost in her life when she needed him most." A few of Jack's friends shifted uncomfortably, the reality of what I was saying hitting them like a ton of bricks. Jack remained frozen, his face pale, but there was nothing he could say to defend himself now. "You've made your choices, Jack. And now you'll face the consequences," I said, my voice steady and final. Turning on my heel, I walked away from him. I didn't need to say any more. The damage had been done. Jack's world was already starting to crumble, and he had no idea what was coming next. I could feel the eyes of the crowd on me as I made my way out, but I didn't care. Justice had already started to unfold, and I was only just getting started. As I stepped back outside, the cool night air hit me like a wave. The taxi was waiting for me, ready to take me back to the hospital. But this time, my mind wasn't filled with dread or uncertainty. No. This time, I felt a sense of purpose, a sense of justice finally being served. I had done what I needed to do. Jack had been confronted, and now it was time for him to deal with the fallout of his actions. But for Emily, my daughter, I would stay by her side, supporting her as she fought, not just for her health, but for her dignity, for her future. I climbed into the cab, closing the door behind me, and watched as the city lights blurred past. I was heading back to the hospital, to Emily, to a new chapter of this fight. But the story wasn't over yet. If you found this story impactful, like this video, subscribe to True Family Revenge Stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your opinions. What would you have done in Amos's shoes? Stay tuned for more powerful stories and real-life lessons on justice, family, and revenge.